This is the Super Rad BMX Podcast. Down the first straight is the cruising Cornhusker over the jump bonsai Brad. Now your host Brad Fanshaw and Tim Lilladora.
Welcome to another episode of the Super Rad BMX Podcast. And I'm Brad Fanshaw, and with me is...
Hey, I'm Tim Lilladora. We're glad you're watching tonight. Thanks for coming along.
We've got another great guest for you, sitting there just waiting to answer all of our questions, and that is Todd Huffman. You might know Todd from a lot of different areas. His time at GT, maybe as a racer, maybe working at SE Racing, or today with Frogtown, or he might be, trying to, find your grandpa's old motocross footage, that Super 8 or the 16 millimeter that's hidden away in somebody's basement. But we'll talk about all that today. But before we do, I just want to remind you that Tim and I are so excited to be doing this podcast and that we have already put so many in the can and we're getting a great response. And that is one of the best things ever because you have been responding by watching, by giving us the ratings, by giving us the comments. And you know how important that is? We've told you on every episode. And now we're asking you to do it again, not just on our YouTube channel, but on our iTunes channel. So please give us a 5-star rating, leave a positive comment, because all the shows are dropping there, as well as every other place you can find a podcast. So go there and follow us also at Super Rad BMX on Instagram and Facebook, whichever you choose. But I will tell you, we definitely put more up on the Instagram page. And Tim and I are not only putting up some really cool stuff about the current shows, but digging through our archives of really cool photos that we have from our careers, some that have never seen light of day before. So go there, check it out. And one last thing is, you got to have some swag. So check out our shirts. We've got a bunch of Super Rad BMX shirts over at Radmatic. That's RADMATTIC, just like our YouTube channel is. Radmatic on YouTube, radmatic.com to find the swag. So go there, check it out. It helps us keep everything going. But you know what? I think he's already loaded in the gate. He's ready to go. Todd Huffman, welcome to Super Rad BMX.
Woo.
Man,
Hey guys,
how are you?
How you doing?
I'm good. We're busy. It's a busy time for us.
How many weeks out as we record this show to the first gate drop at Frogtown?
1. No, I'm sorry, 4 weeks out. 4 weeks out.
4 weeks out. That is a busy time for any event promoter. You're trying to nail all the final details. Now, what point, well, we're going to get into all this, but I just want to ask this one question. At what point do you actually depart? How far out do you have to be up there?
I will be in Angels Camp on maybe Labor Day or at least the Tuesday after Labor Day. So a few days in advance.
Okay.
I mean, we are building the track though in 2 weeks. So the track gets built 2 weeks in advance.
Great.
So,
Can you hold up the diagram so we know what it looks like? And
I can't because I don't have it handy here.
Oh, come on.
So
he had a 3D printed model that he showed us before we turned the cameras on, and we know it all now. So,
well, no, we are working on a couple of improvements for it, or not? Improvements. Heck, Chris Moeller had contacted me a while back and said, "Hey, Todd, we need to I want to make the S&M glory hole a little more glorious." And I said, "Well, what do you mean, Chris?" And he goes, "Well, we need to make it to where it's a true decision maker, that if you're behind and you could go for it, you could go from 4th to 1st.
Wow.
Right? But if you miss, you're going to be wet and muddy and won't be fun." but you're not going to get hurt. Like I cautioned them that part of it. So we sent enough people to the hospital.
So it's not a box like some of the older tracks back in our days, but it's more of a rollout where you can.
It'll kind of roll out, and
Yeah.
you'll squish out through the mud.
Right. But you're not gonna remember some of those tracks that actually had built like with 2x4s around it to hold the water in.
I
raced at a couple
liner in
tracks.
it, and
Yeah, and
Yeah.
if you didn't quite clear it, you were headed to the bike shop to get a new back rim because you hit that
yeah.
box, or you would flip over the bars and everything like that. But,
no, we want to make it where it's safe, but a skilled rider could do some minor heroics and put himself in a good position going into that last turn. So,
what do you think, Tim? You
That's
raced there.
interesting.
What do you think?
Well, that's interesting because actually last year I think it did matter. Like you could pass somebody by jumping it because you did have to veer left to go around it, but it was pretty equal last year, I thought.
yeah, it's going to be more of a drastic go round.
Okay.
And then it has to obviously that you have to be able to navigate side hacks and that because we got so many side hacks. I mean, honestly, I think that this year at Frogtown, we're going to have more side hacks than perhaps I will even go as far to say the history of the sport.
Really?
Wow.
How many
That's cool.
left-handed ones?
I don't know, actually. It's a mix, though, for sure. And only half of those people will actually know how to ride a side hack.
Yeah.
Right? The people
they're just
where to lean and
where to lean, and they forget to push. They're like, I'm along for the ride. So,
was it year before? We had some guys come into and Tim's been there on a side hack. They're on a right-hand hack. And so it's a left-hand turn. And we have a photo sequence of them coming into the turn and at the bottom of the hill, the starting hill, Tim, at the fastest part of the race course.
Oh my God.
And the pilot, remember, it's a right-hand hack, right? And he's making a left-hand turn. And the pilot has his left foot out, like he's motoing it, right? Like he's going to fall over. But the hack is keeping him up, right? You don't have to put your foot down. You just keep pedaling, right? But he's got his foot out, right? And the monkey, normally you would, on a left hand, you would lean and get behind, grab the rear seat, and go behind the pilot, right? To keep the weight from, nope. The monkey has got his arm and head tucked underneath the pilot's head between him and the handlebars. He's like trying to crawl up onto the top tube. It's hilarious because right after that, it's a photo sequence. They're completely ass over tea kettle past the first turn. Completely went off the banners.
Wow.
That's awesome.
You gotta know how to ride a side hack. You gotta learn.
And to have the photo sequence of it makes it even
better. It's perfect. Matt Heaps from Heaps Photography works for Dan's competition. They're one of our sponsors, and he is the king of photo sequences at Frogtown. He gets the best ones. We have one in our new BMX Action program for this year that's going to be, it's awesome in the back of the book. So
that's cool. Hey,
yeah.
And one of the reasons I wanted to let everyone know, the reason we had Todd on, we actually are recording this, and we're going to leapfrog backwards a bunch of our other guests that we've already recorded shows with, so that this can get out in time for you to hear it and maybe make a decision to go if you haven't already. And and that's why we're doing this, because we're putting you ahead of the Tracer Finn interview, the Bob Harrow interview. We're putting you ahead of. We're putting you ahead of, gosh, I'm trying to think of who else. I think we had some presidential candidates that we interviewed that that we don't really care. We're going to keep pushing them to the back.
And Gork, we've got a really good episode with Gork coming up too.
Gork,
so, yeah,
he'll understand. He's in the promotions and event business, working for USA BMX, and so and he's got Frogtown in his blood, that guy. So he'll understand.
Good.
Absolutely.
Well, that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
So let's get going. I want before we get to Frogtown intently, I want to really talk a little bit about your early days. You were a NorCal guy. You made your way down to SoCal. Give us a little thumbnail on how that all transpired.
So I was I don't know, kind of early BMX racer in Northern California. I was racing in 70. Maybe my first race was 75 up in Sacramento Speedway. And then I raced a little couple NBA races in UBR up until 78. And I wasn't very good. And then I got 79. I got what the ABA used to call the fume syndrome, right? Gas fumes and perfume. Remember that, Brad?
Yeah. Yep.
Right.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah.
The girls,
they
got the perfume. The boys
you gotta
got
have a car. You want to get the chicks, you got to have a car. To get the car, you got to have some dumb fast food style job that takes away the weekends because you're low man on the totem pole. And so, until you get some seniority washing dishes, you can't get the weekends back, right? So
Tim and I talked about this exact thing on the
I'm
very
laughing
first
about
episode.
that because Brad kind of got the fume syndrome there for a while too. I actually quit my job to go to a race. Brad had to stay that weekend.
The Rondo Classic. And it was keep my job at the pizza place at Godfather's Pizza so I could, pay for my car, or quit. Tim quit Valentino's Pizza and went to the Rondo Classic, and I stayed behind and worked. And,
and I don't know if it's still like this with USA BMX's classes today, but the 14, 15-year-old class was the biggest class, most riders, most moto count, everything, right?
Yeah.
Smallest, 16, 17. And it comes back at 18, right?
Yeah.
Like, seriously, it works just like that. And that was me, right? So, and I wasn't very good the first go around, but when I came back, man, I was pretty good. Like in 2 years, and not, I had started my bike and I was riding it, but I was hanging out with some motocross guys and riding a little motocross. But I'd found out that there was a little bike shop on my way home to my house, and I said, "Oh, look at that! There's a BMX bike shop in my little town." So I went in there, and it opened up the last year and a half or so, and it was called Pedal It People. And I started asking them questions, and I'm like, "Oh, where are they racing around here now?" And they go, "Yeah, there's a race right up the freeway at Pollock Pines, and you should go there and race sometime, right?" That the Sturger family was the ones running it. And I told them what I'd done. They're like looking at me like, "Oh man, this guy really kind of knows what he might be doing," right? Because they're all new at this point.
Oh, okay.
And so, man, within a week, they gave me a brand new PK Ripper, right?
Sweet.
Never even raced it for them, right? I went there. And maybe they were letting me borrow it, right? But it was a brand new bike. And I won open. I won the expert. I won everything, right? And I mean, kind of to the envy of guys like Gork. I think Gork was there and his brother and some other locals. They've been racing like for a year and a half. And who's this new guy, right? Because I just came in and smoked everybody, right? And then it was just kind of on from there. So through high school, and they were an SE dealer. And I think, Scott was flirting with the owner's wife, typical. And so she was able to kind of give me a co-sponsor with SC, and then I got the factory deal.
So all the riders got special treatment because of that little connection there with Scott.
That's great. I mean, Judy Sturger ran, so I mean, she didn't respond to it, but you could just tell that he was trying to do anything he could to get in her favor, so anyhow, but so 1982, leading up to that in 81, I was working for a bike shop, but Scott knew that I kind of had a gift for gab, and he invited me down to the BDS Expo, the Long Beach bike show. Do you remember that, Brad?
I remember that.
Long Beach, right? That was the big annual trade show in January. So I flew down there to work the show, and actually I flew down with Johnny Valdez from the UBR. We went from a national in San Francisco, the Cow Palace, where had this guy named Brian Patterson in my class. Who the hell's he, right? Well, Brian had been out for like a year and a half or out for a long time with a broken leg or something, right? And this is like his first race back. And man, I was going to win this national, and nope, not with a Brian Patterson in the team. Not happening.
Broken leg or not, man. He was bad.
Yeah. Screw Brian. But I went down, I worked that trade show for Scott, right? And I was a salesman for SE bicycles on the trade show floor, talking to bike dealers, right? And selling PK rippers and quad angles and landing gear forks. And it was then also that Scott had done this deal with Murray bicycles to have these SE by Murray or Murray by SE kind of bikes.
Yeah, I remember that.
I don't remember a lot about
junk.
Vaguely, yeah.
They were junk, right? Anyhow, but we had them on display at Interbike, right? It wasn't their BDS, and yeah. I remember distinctly. I was out there by the corner. We had a little island booth. I don't know, it was like 20 by 60, and showing these bikes. And these guys came by, and I look at they're looking at these Murray bikes, right? And I look at their name badges, right? And it's like, I don't know, Dale Smith and Joe Schmo, whatever. Huffman Bicycle Corporation.
Oh.
It was the Huffy guys, right? And they're looking at these Murray bikes, right? And they noticed my name tag. I start talking, they notice my name tag. And they go, "You should be working for us." With a name like that, And anyhow, funny thing to remember.
Everybody would have thought you were part of the family. Oh yeah, he must be somebody's kid or something.
Yeah. Well, and so then Scott, of course, this guy can actually, he's 19 years old. He can do this thing. So Scott hired me, and I thought it was going to be this, great, huge job. I was going to make all kinds of money. I was already spending it up in Northern California before I even left up there, but I came down in March of 1982, and I moved in with Rod Beckering and his family for a little bit. And the weekend I moved down, there was a War of the Stars at the Long Beach Convention Center, NBL race on a purpose-made track. The lagoon thing on the outside of the big Shoreline Drive.
Yeah, where out the sidewalk that went out around it and everything.
Yeah, and it's got the pond that goes by. The track was like right there,
Yeah, that'd be cool.
And yeah, I made the Pro Open main. I don't know how I did. I didn't get last, but I finished middle of the pack. But I distinctly remember, like, man, I was winning practice like every time. I was so good at practice. Rod Beckering used to say, "Huff, you win practice. You're the best. You can snap on Big and Stu and all those guys." Can never translate it to the actual races.
I want to ask you something. Why is it? I find it humorous, and I know why. But I mean, all the stories. Everyone who worked for Scott at SE, it's always the same story. Yeah, man, I came working. I was gonna, and well, it was like wah.
Yeah. Other than Perry, had obviously lots of flashes of brilliance, and maybe Bubba Hayes. The rest of us were all, even Rod would make mains and stuff, but he didn't win nationals like regularly or anything, and I don't know. It was maybe we were having too much other kinds of fun for sure.
Well, and I think you were also working too. I mean, because at SE, it was every man on deck, right?
Well, and we were either working to get to the races and keeping vehicles and buses together to get to the races. And Scott, God bless him. He's the big personality salesman guy, but SE, it was always broke, right? Like,
yeah, that's how I always remember.
The company was just running on a shoestring the whole time. And I mean, at the end of the day, it was kind of sad because, SC really should have became what GT became, as far as the strength of a brand and the products. And if the management, it just hadn't gotten so sideways,
Would you say that there's two types of entrepreneurs, and, Scott was the idea man and the make it look great, but there's always that follow through on the backside financial side that's always a little more difficult and a little more tedious. And maybe Rich was more of that tedious and cross the T's type of an entrepreneur.
Well, and Richard, just his ego wasn't in it. You know what I mean? He was about taking care of business, right?
Yeah.
And taking care of the dealers and his distributors and not getting distracted by, jumping off of houses on your BMX bike or going to races or running around saying you're the Long Beach Dangler, and you know what I mean? Like,
I know I had my interactions with the man,
Yeah.
with both of them. And
Oh man.
Rich was very matter of fact. He wanted to do the deal. It was this. And Scott, it was, throw a bunch of stuff on the wall and see what sticks. And, it was.
In 82, and that was my best year racing. I ended up getting #2 UBR Pro that year because I was actually pretty good. I was living with Rod and Guyberson, and man, we were at Narler Park every 5 nights a week. We had
Really?
pizza
That's
nights,
awesome.
yeah, we had that place wired. So, and Rod would, because I was chasing the UBR points even after I'd moved down south, and he would love to go to those races, and we would drive up to him, and I remember one time we went into Scott's office, right? And Scott's got the big desk and it's piled full of folders and pictures of himself and whatever, all that stuff with Oz and Australia and whatever. And Rod and I go in there because we want to go to this race. And what did we say? I don't know, however the conversation got started, but Scott gets into it's like, guys, I'm 26 years old, almost 27. I own a $6 million a year company. Like, he's showing off, right? This is how he leads in the conversation, right? And then Rod's like, all right, effer, can you pay our entry fees this weekend at the UBR race? And Scott would go, babe, we're on our ass. I just don't have the freaking money. Within the same sentence.
The highs and the lows.
The highs and the lows.
Were you there when he was kicking around with that singer Eddie Rabbit? Do you remember those days? And
Eddie Rabbit and yeah.
Because I remember Scott coming up to me and going, yeah, really tight with Eddie Rabbit. And, I just invested. And when you say this type of a sentence, he had just told me about how he couldn't afford this, couldn't afford that. But then he goes, just invested in Casablanca Records. I'm one of the owners. And I was like, I didn't know whether to be impressed or to be like, what? You can't pay these bills, but you just invested in Casablanca Records,
Oh, yeah. No, it was all BS. They moved it. We moved from Signal Hill to that. And great guy. He's still online. He loves motocross. He's a drag racing freak. You should reach out and just befriend him. Mickey Bryant, right?
Uh-huh.
Still talk to Mickey. He was like Eddie's manager, tour manager.
Oh,
right?
okay.
So we knew Mickey first because he was around more with Scott, money thing, whatever. And Eddie came to see the building in Paramount on Paramount Boulevard there in Long Beach. And I remember we all got to go to a Mickey, an Eddie Rabbit concert with Crystal Gale.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
At the Los Alamitos racetrack.
Nice.
Right. And that was our big moment and we got pictures taken with Eddie and all that stuff. But yeah, that was actually the beginning of the end. Honestly, that was.
Oh, damn.
Scott could handle the money and the responsibility that came with moving into this big building. And he did this huge deal with Toby Henderson. I don't know how huge a deal it was, but Toby is no dummy, right? And he was coming from, I think, Murray, right? Mm-hmm. It was after the Hutch deal. One of those, but for SC to sponsor Toby Henderson at that time of Toby's career, because he was on fire, it was a big deal for us. And man, Scott was just into some bad things, and it wasn't much longer after that than I had Scott in my face, yelling at me, screaming at me, pulling his fake teeth out, talking about bounce paychecks, and then I was out the door. And Bob Morales and I started more distributing the very next day at the Torker bankruptcy auction. That was the next day. And
Wow.
the rest.
Yeah, I think I watched a podcast where you talked about, buying up the tooling and stuff from the
Yeah,
company that went bankrupt.
so I left SC on one day, and Bob and I were kind of hanging out, and I was just super impressed. Thought it was so cool. He had dyno, and he's making his own stickers and doing his own thing. And he had this little,
And he had a Biz Kid license plate. So, I mean, right there.
yeah, right. And so, man, it came up that Torker auction was the next day,
Wow.
and it was like liquidation.
I mean,
Every
yeah.
Southern California BMX company scavenger was there, right? Gary and Richard from GT were there, right? Scott and Mike from SE were there, right? Here's me and Bob, right? And everyone else is after the big stuff, machinery, welders, mills and all that stuff. Well, they had this lot of parts, right, that they would make their kit bikes, right? So if you bought
okay.
or whatever, came with handlebars and a stem and some grips and wheels, whatever. But it was kind of a hodgepodge of stuff, right? But there was a lot on it, and it was like $3,800. And we bid on it, and we got it. And so we had this big truckload of parts, stems, and torque of this, an array of rims, and Bob's mom loaned us the money to buy that stuff. And we took it down to Bob's office, and he was working out of GT's building on, I don't know, Container or Commercial Avenue there in Huntington.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he had, like, where they were welding bikes in the back, he had a little front office, and he has heat presses for his jerseys and his t-shirts and stuff. And I just went in there and I got on the phone. I started calling all my SE dealers, and I started moving all this stuff, and that was the beginning of more distributing, and me and Bob being partners, which turned into creating the Auburn bicycles, I don't know, a year or so later, At that point we had to leave. Richard kicked us out. And so we ended up getting our own place.
Richard didn't want you selling your own bikes.
Yeah, it was kind of hard,
right?
And Bob was doing the AFA too. That was a big deal. That was really come into its own, from King of the Skate Parks and King of the Flatland, or whatever you called the Flatland contests. And so we had to go do our own thing, so.
Well, let's talk about Auburn.
I want to hear more about Auburn too.
Yeah.
How many Auburns did you make? I thought that bike was so cool, by the way.
Yeah, it was a great bike.
Yeah, the story behind the Auburn, and it's interesting, a lot of people don't know this. It really, because Bob and I were both into motocross, we thought we would create a bike that could be licensed from Honda. And we hired, I don't know how much we paid him, maybe $100 or something. Dale Davis, who is now with 60 Helmets, still doing design work. He was GT's in-house artist at the time, before they had the big art department with Austin and Sean Buckley and Leighton, all those guys, right? And Dale Davis did a accurate rendering, like a conceptual, like a guy from Art Center would do, right? Brad,
like one of my cars that I'd have designed.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
And it was a Honda CR20R, right? It had Honda down there with the right, and this was in the mid '80s, right? So it had the blue seat, like the factory Honda bikes, in red with the chrome and gold wheels, and it was cool.
Like a Suzuki bike or a Kawasaki bike, but pushed to the next level.
Oh yeah, and it was a real race bike too. So, and Honda rejected it, right? They didn't want the liability of it, and so, but we still thought
liability. That's crazy.
Right. Well, because they didn't
liability. They sell motorcycles. They were selling those 3-wheeled ATVs.
Yeah, the ones that they pulled back and tried to claw back every single one. Maybe it was at the same time.
Yeah. Well, they didn't make it. And it was a license deal, and there were kids involved and whatever, so.
So you wanted to build the bikes and have the right to put the sticker pack on it and market it as the Honda bike and pay them a royalty, something
Correct.
Along that line?
That was it. We had a great design, and the 2-piece thing was kind of innovative, and they didn't want to do it, but we wanted to do it. And so we said, well, let's do it ourselves. And we're like, well, what will we call it? And everybody thinks it came from the famous Auburn DeWitt BMX track, which is up where I'm kind of from in Northern California. Auburn, California is a sister city to Porterville. That famous racetrack was there. But no, Bob and I, Bob's a car guy, and we were talking about cars and the Auburn Boattail Speedster, that,
Sure, I know it well.
and that is what the Auburn bicycle is named after, that old automobile brand.
Wondered about that. Yeah, I thought it had probably had a connection there to the car.
Back
That's
in the
great.
day, I honestly just figured it was homage to some relative who had the name, I had no idea, and
It was Auburn University or, Crimson Tide or any of that, whatever that kind of, whatever those schools are. And
I mean, I told Rich Long once, he asked me where the name came, and I said, that was Todd just saying, burn. Yeah, man. Yeah.
I'll burn you.
No, it's interesting because even to a car guy, Auburn Boattail Speedster is quite obscure because that goes all the way back to the 20s and 30s. And, it's not a contemporary muscle car or something like that.
So it's Model A cool. Roadster.
Yeah. So
but that is what it's named after. And then, but at the time, remember the scooters that like Mongoose discovered came out first, the little push scooters, that was becoming like the rage, right? And so we were importing our own little scooter called Scootster. So we had a connection in Taiwan, and the guy here in Gardena who was helping us import them, he would import them and take 5%, but he would put up all the money for them because it's expensive to do that kind of importing, right? So he had us hooked up with a factory. So the very first Auburn prototype was actually made in Taiwan. I still have it, the frame.
Really?
And it is a pig, and it's really janky and it is cobbled together, right? The first one was, right? But we got the bike, and actually Rod Beckering, he had his own falling out with Scott. He put it together and raced that Vision World Cup at Irvine.
Yes.
You remember that, Brad?
Yeah, I do.
Scott was doing the TV for that race.
We had him doing all the commentary back then.
Yeah, with Dean Bradley and all those guys. So
Dean Bradley, and there was a third guy from up in Hollywood, blonde guy, big teeth. I knew him well, and I can't remember his name.
Sandfield, maybe.
What? Yeah,
I was just watching a bunch of Scott's. There's like a mashup of all his commentary things on YouTube.
Yeah.
I just saw that like yesterday or the day before. I mean, he was good. Scott was a good talker.
Yeah.
He knew the sport and all that stuff. So,
Rod
raced that bike there, but the best part about that race was that Gork was there, and he introduced me to Todd Corbett, who was from Florida. And, it was the first time I met TC. And I don't know if we talked about him riding the bike or, maybe I just met him for the first time. But that would turn into like the next few months later, we had a better version of the bike that Gary Turner made. And we're out at Elsinore. And that's when we actually had a real conversation about, hey, GT is going to start making this for us. Right.
That's what I was going to ask you. Who made them for you? So
GT
Gary built your prototype in his little shop back there, huh?
Yeah, so we had this ugly Taiwanese version, right? It's horrible, right? Which I still have it, and I think it's really cool now, right? If you would see it. And then Gary built one that was like the rear triangle was like all these little pieces mitered, and the chainstays were like super complicated, right? And that was like the next reiteration of it. And then Gary figured out how to do that by just bending the square tubes. And, so I have all those reiterations of those frames, right? So
that's cool.
And Tim, to get back to your question, I don't know. We made a few hundred of them, I think, before 1989 when I went to work for GT, and I kind of lost track of, because I got completely sucked into being the marketing guy at GT. My biggest problem with our own company was my brain always worked bigger than my pocketbook, right? And I wanted to do cool ads and all this stuff. We could just never afford it, and, to go work at GT where it's like, kid in the candy store with getting to do cool stuff and big rigs and trucks and trailers and, half pipes.
Did GT keep building Auburns then after you went to work for GT? That's what I
They
thought.
did.
Yeah.
It was always a little bit of a problem between me and Richard because I was still, my heart and soul was still kind of in the GT brand, but it really was kind of treated like a stepchild at GT because it was, there was GT and Dyno and then Robinson and then Powerlight and then Auburn, but they kept making them. And Penny Westman, the sales gal, hi Penny, she's listening. She loved Auburn, and she was, Richard's right-hand sales girl on the phones. And so she really helped push it. And she got more colors made, and she got production to, because she had good dealers who were asking for them. And she probably kept Auburn alive to the masses for years to come than I ever could, so.
Now, how'd you come up with the two-tone finish on those?
Well, that was all the Honda thing, right? We had, if you think of a CR back in 1986 or 87, when Ricky Johnson and David Bailey were riding those things, they were, the red bike with the polished ProLink.
Yeah, the swing arm and everything.
Swing arm.
That was it.
Yeah.
That was the whole artistic thing with it. And of course, and we were sincere about it. We thought, the two-piece thing would be great because you could buy one. You could buy maybe one with a new rear end that was an inch longer, right? Or a half an inch shorter, right? And you'd have all these rear ends that you could put on them depending on, how you rode, whatever. And, an inch on the rear end from the bottom bracket to the rear axle makes a big difference. And, be jumping.
Or you could switch out the front end too, if you get taller.
Yeah, no, that was all part of it. And you know what? We never made one different size.
Never made what?
It was just one size.
It was always one size. Even years later, when they made the cool aluminum one, because that was the next reiteration of it, and that was going to have different sizes. And GT's just too busy; they could just never get to it. And so it was always this two-piece thing that really never saw the potential that it was originally designed for. 5, 6, 8 years earlier,
Well, Todd, when you're not doing Frogtown and you're not doing charity events, you could come out with new sizes for the old frames. Come on, man.
I'm going to make a note of doing a two-piece frame because no one's done that in a long time.
Yeah. Redline came out with one after we did it. I think they're one of their freestyle bikes had a bolt-on thing in the back or something. I don't know. But hey, it was I know for like 2 years in a row, I think 2 years, maybe just 1 year, but it could be 2 years. Auburn won the BMX Plus Bike of the Year.
That's good.
At the height of, all these other much bigger brands who advertise way more with high torque publications, so.
But it visually stuck out. I mean, that bike always just, the colors, the finish, the way it was just was always one of those bikes that stood out, It was
well, and I think having TC and Big E on the road, right? Those guys were like the great Pied Piper ambassadors, doing all those clinics and going around in our little Auburn shuttle. I don't know if you guys remember seeing that little Mitsubishi minivan we had. We had the coolest little factory rig in the whole.
I don't remember that, but
yeah,
you'll have to dig up a photo of that for us.
Oh yeah, I'll find one for you in your post edit. So
that's so Auburn Bikes, the director of marketing at GT, you even threw in a couple little event promotion things in there. Like I think it was short-lived, but it had a name. I'm trying to think. It was Vertical Carnival or Vertical Sports Carnival.
INVERT,
the
Vertical Sports Carnival. I actually left GT in '98. Right before the Schwinn thing took over to do that. It's weird. I left GT, this great job. It was going to implode very soon anyway, because of the Schwinn takeover. But I left that because I had this idea to do this extreme sports carnival thing, which was kind of before the X Games, right? Mm-hmm. It was ahead of its time, right? With mixing a consumer expo with all these skate and BMX sports. and we rented the Anaheim Convention Center. That wasn't cheap
No.
to do it. I think we did it twice there, and it was just a very expensive, endeavor, right? You should just ride like Greg Grubbs, your fellow Nebraskan, likes to say, "Oh, I should just ride down the road and throw $100,000 bills out the window." That was
I could see him say that. Yeah.
Well, and the final straw to that was when we tried to got it away from the convention center. I developed this idea with these shopping malls, and at the Irvine Spectrum, we tried to do it its final year, October of 2001.
Oh.
So 1 month after 9/11, and it's Friday, and we have the whole right where the 5 and the 405 freeway comes together, right? That whole parking lot. Now it's parking structure and a Target and everything, right?
Yeah.
But man, it was set up like, the X Games, right? Ramps and dirt and booths and a freestyle motocross exhibition. And I'll try to tell the short story. So I didn't know this, but a freestyle, one of the S&M guys, Troy Murray, anyhow, ramp rider, had a beef with Brian Deegan from some of the earlier thing, and it's Friday. We're just getting the event going. We've got 2 more full days of selling beer and tickets, to help pay this thing. Very expensive. Another very expensive thing. This is going to be it. This is finally going to make up for the other
one.
This is the one. They say it takes 3 years. This is going to be the 3rd year, right? I'm laughing now. But we have the half pipe competition, and this Troy guy gets like, I don't know, 3rd or 4th place or something. But I had heard about this beef going in. The Metal Militia are going to do their freestyle show. Cameron Steele's announcing it and everything, right? And we got the freestyle area is fenced in within our venue area, right? So, crowd safety and everything. Well, I'd heard about this beef, and Troy had been drinking, right? And I told Troy, when I'm in my little event trailer, and I'm writing the pro purse checks out for the winners of the contest, right? And I give him his money. I said, "Troy, go home," right? "I will, Todd,"
Trying to diffuse it ahead of the time.
Yeah, whatever, right? And because at that point, the militia guys, right? And Ronnie Feist and Deegan and all these guys, And so then I'm just back to putting out fires, That's all you do with being an event guy. All you do is run around with a fire hose.
Oh yeah.
Putting out fires all day long, right? Frogtown, no different, right? So I go on to my other things. The next thing I notice, I look across our venue, across the parking lot, the Irvine Spectrum, and to the freestyle area. And the Metal Militia show is just getting ready to start, right? The riders are driving down, back and forth, waving the crowd, fists and spiked collars and all the bullshit they'd wear, whatever, right? And I see Troy McMurray, this over at the fence, a spectator. He's got a 58.
Hey, wait right there, because Tim's got to give us a tech tip of the. No, I'm just kidding you. I'm just kidding you, man. I was waiting till you came to the top of it.
Oh, do you have something to do, Tim?
No,
we're just messing with you, man. Go ahead.
Oh, I see you got.
I did have a camera that died. I did have my close-up camera died. I don't know why, but.
Oh, I like this though. This is good too.
So the Metal Militia.
Sorry for the long story, guys, but the Metal Militia are getting ready to do the show's kind of starting, right? And right when I look over, I see Troy didn't go home, and he's got himself like a 58-ounce.
He went and got more beer,
right? And as these guys are riding, doing their warm-up hero introduction laps, I see him right when one of the riders rides through, takes this full beer and just throws it through the fence at him, right? Just soaks this militia guy. I don't know if it was Deegan or Ronnie. I don't know who it was, and these guys are pissed. All of them get on their motorcycles, right? And they come back and they come running towards the fence, and they just blow through the fence on the bikes, just like ghost ride the fence and the fence blows open, and now it's a brawl, right? Our security guys, Troy Murray, other people are like in it now. The whole thing turns into chaos, right? Cops
Last
come.
thing that you want as a promoter.
Oh, the cops don't just differently roll out. It's Newport Beach, Irvine with frickin' riot gear.
Yeah, they step up hard.
A month after 9/11, they're not going to mess around, right? And they came in and shut the event down and said, you're done for the whole week. And
No way.
oh yeah, they shut us down. We had to pack up everything.
Man,
I was wiped out. Wiped me out.
that's horrible.
Yeah. So
I never heard that story before.
Not the greatest
yeah,
experience.
you had to
on
ask
that
about
one.
invert, Brad.
I know. I'm
Yeah,
sorry I asked.
Hey, not many
think,
people know that story, actually. So Todd Corbett does, because he was there, letting me cry on his shoulder because I was crying. Rough.
Yeah.
That is the horror story of an event promoter, because everything's on the front side. And if something like that happens, it just goes away, and you lived it. I mean, that's
Well, and because you never, and I learned my lesson then. I had to learn another painful lesson a year later or so, but you don't have really enough money into it that you can afford to lose.
Mhm.
Like living sponsor check to whatever, refinancing a piece of your house or a second or a third, right? And so, man, that night I goes to the bank. I'm trying to stop payment on a bunch of checks we wrote that we know we're going to bounce, but I just need to kind of gather up, conserve cash to know how to, dole it out. Of course, the first one I'm trying to put a stop payment on the metal militia check, right? Because they're the ones that started it, right? That's the problem.
Yeah, they made it all go downhill.
Yeah, and it was, as Troy Murray, whatever, the guy shouldn't have done it, but still, they should have been professional. But no, they had cashed that check I gave him. I don't know what it was. It was 10,000 or 15,000. It was a lot of money in 2001, right?
Yeah.
So, I always had a kind of a thing for digging since then. He doesn't know me from Adam. I met him one time since then. He has no idea that you were the guy kind of deal, right?
You were the guy.
So years later, remember when he went to the Winter X Games?
Yeah.
Just completely yard sailed himself and like Evel Knievel broke every bone in his body crash, I was sitting at a bar by myself in downtown Fullerton watching on TV when that happened. And I was just like, cheers. Good job. Karma.
Was it a 58 ouncer that you held up?
Yeah. Took a big pull off that, because his guys really screwed me over. So,
dude, that sucks. I'm sorry for you. That's and that is the life of promoter. I mean,
and it's the risk you take for sure.
Yeah. Your partner in Pipeline Digital, Don Hoffman.
Yep.
Did he ever tell you what we pulled on him when we were putting on the one of the big Vision events that we did back in the day? One of those skateboard events.
Irvine?
Yes, Irvine. We had the Red Hot Chili Peppers playing. We had that half pipe. We had everything. Did he tell you?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I remember talking about something big happened though.
We all conspired because Don, he's always nervous. He's always nervous.
We're going to jail. We're going to jail.
And it was, we'd been building up to this event. We had everything, and all those racks of lighting and the pooled lights over the crowd so that the videos would all be right. And had a ton of money in it. We, rented the Bren Center, everything. And we waited till the morning of, and we had been advertising with K-Rock, and poor man, we got him on it, and he had a guy that worked at the fire department. Anyways, call him at 6 a.m. at his house, and live on the air on K-Rock say, yeah, this is the fire marshal. We have a big issue. That half pipe, it needs to be moved, and all your lighting needs to be moved 15 feet to the right, which was an impossibility. There would be no way, even if you had a week to do it, and or this event can't happen. And Hoffman melted down, man, melted down.
gotta be kidding me.
What? Are you kidding? Oh my God. And he melts down on the radio. And damn it, he got to the event site. We're all laughing. And he's going, no, we got to check everything because, and we're like, Don, it was a joke. I know, but we still got to check everything.
Oh, yeah. On
Oh,
high alert.
what a horrible joke. He had given the guy a heart attack.
You got to know Don, Tim.
You got to know Don, Tim, for sure.
Because we're gonna run short of time, and we got so much to talk about on Frogtown.
Yeah.
Talk briefly about you're changing your career. You teamed up with Don and formed Pipeline Digital and became a very successful filmmaker with things like the Motocross Files and some of those type of productions.
Well, Don and I were working together at GT, right? And
after he left Vision,
after he left Vision, we created we built out the video department, and we're doing all those BMX shows for the ABA, right? We were producing all those shows for Prime Network and Fox, and we came up with that show Crank TV that Todd Harris was on. In fact, Todd was in Paris doing some of the cycling commentator, and he was our talent for Crank TV. So Don and I were working together, and so when I left and was doing my own thing for a while, after the INVERT debacle and some other things, Don and I got together, to form Pipeline Digital Media, named after the Pipeline Skate Park, which is famous home of the king of the skate parks with Eddie Fuel and all those guys. But the first project, and we got this new Vericam Panasonic camera, right? Which is at the time was this cool HD, Ultra HD kind of camera rig. And Don is friends with Stacy Peralta, right?
Oh yeah, forever.
Stacy had just come out with Dogtown and Z-Boys, his film, which was revolutionary, amazing, and just amazing, right? Yeah, and we've all seen it. And it got such good reviews, and Don was like, gosh, this, we should do something, nostalgia like. And we talked about BMX because we both had roots in that, but the market was just so small, right? And we're talking TV and whatever. And I said, hey, what about motocross? Because when I was a kid and a motocross goon, all we could ever do is read about the stars of the sport like Bob Hanna or Marty Smith or Brad Lackey in magazines, right? You never got to know who they really were. And so we made a little demo. Jimmy McIlvaine from High Torque got me in touch with Super Hunky, who put us in touch with Brad Lackey. And Brad, we did a little initial interview with Brad at Carlsbad Raceway in 2003, the winter, December, at the Christmas race. And then we did an interview in January with Marty Smith. And so we made this little 5-minute sizzle reel, and we shopped it, like trying to find somebody to do it. And it took till the middle of 2005 when Bob Ecker, the programming guy at the Speed Channel, said, I like this thing. And I got to give Don full credit of it because, the thing you see today a lot in commercials and movies where they make a photo look like it's moving.
Oh, yeah. I remember when Don started doing that. Yeah.
Made it called an animated still, right?
Yeah.
And Don had seen the effect in that movie about Bob Evans, the producer of The Godfather and Chinatown. The kid stays in the picture.
Mm-hmm.
It was a movie. It was the first time that effect was kind of done. And Don, in one of his mini DV magazines, they had the editor, the guy with this Spanish name, that had a how-to on how to do it between Adobe Photoshop and After Effects, like the pieces of the Adobe suite, you could figure out how to do it. And Don saw that article and he's like, oh, Todd, what do you think about doing some of those motocross pictures like this? And I go, well, do you know how to do it? And he goes, I don't know how to do that, but we know a guy who can. And so we gave this guy the article and some pictures. And man, he made some still pictures of Brad Lackey and Marty Smith come alive. And we had those in that sizzle reel, right? So Bob Ecker from the Speed Channel saw that and he goes, you guys are the first guys I've seen in the sports do that effect. I like it. And he took.
And he was a son of a bitch. He was hard to please. Bob was.
Oh, you know Bob Ecker.
Oh yeah, yeah. I
Okay.
worked with him at Speed Channel. So.
Yeah, but he took 5 episodes.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But I think he told us like in I don't know. He told us like in September, and he wants to start airing the shows in like November.
Of course,
We
yeah.
had 2 months to produce 5 mini biographies on the, as Davey Coombs called it, Mount Rushmore of motocross, right? Brad Lackey, Marty Smith, Roger DeCoster, Ricky Johnson, and Bob Hanna, right? So we had like 2 months to do this, and Lucas stepped up and threw a little bit of money at us, and the rest is history. And that, no one had a show like that in motocross before.
Awesome.
Those are good. Yeah, you did an excellent job. I watched that. I mean, that's just real good work, man.
Yeah, so we got to do some movies from that work, and our big, pinnacle project was the Penton movie a few years ago that the little theatrical release, and was fun,
That was some great
What's
stuff.
next? What are you working on next in that realm?
Oh, we have nothing. We're finishing up a television show about a drifter off-road guy, Vaughn Gittin Jr. from Av TV, famous guy, driver, which is a little TV show. And then we're going to be starting a project next year about the history of the Blackwater 100, a very famous off-road race. Kind of the grandfather to the Red Bull Romaniacs, and the Erzberg Enduro. You see that stuff on TV.
Right.
Hard enduros, they call it. Well, this was kind of the first one, and it turned into what is known as a GNCC series today. So we're going to be doing a documentary on the 50 years of GNCC racing, and that's for next year. So, but I have a BMX project I want to do, and
a BMX. You cut out a little bit. BMX movie.
Well, we have two documentary projects that are kind of, I'll say, in development, but one is the history of the JAG team.
Okay.
Not so much the history of that whole team, but more, focusing on Tommy Brackens and Turnell and those guys from South Central LA, the whole idea.
Yeah, I think I've seen some of your original,
idea came from Grubber and Scott Town. Greg Grubbs and Scott Town, look at us, a bunch of white guys, right? Come up with this awesome story that needs to be told about these kids in South Central LA, whatever, that, between the crime and the stick and ball sports and music, they found their way on bicycles.
Yeah.
BMX and became world champions. And, so it's a really good story. And I want to tell that. And then we have a project someday to do on the Scot Breithaupt, which will be the story of the good, the bad, and the ugly,
Yeah.
So
nobody. That's a tough one. I mean, for me, he was always so gracious to me, and just always a tough story.
It's going to be, I mean, I always tell people with the film and TV projects that no matter who you are, if you don't put a lump in the viewer's throat, at least, if not jerking a tear or something, we didn't do our job.
Yeah, you got to make them smile, make them cry, make them laugh.
Oh yeah. I want people to walk out of the theater or walk away from the TV worn out because they have these highs and lows, and back to the highs again. They're like, man, that thing wore me out. It was awesome, and man, 2 hours went by. Really? I want more, that kind of thing.
And Breithaupt has one of those stories where it was,
and
it's the what could have been if type of attitude with it as well. It's
well, and the whole, if you think about it, the story begins in a dirt field and it ends in a dirt field.
Yes.
Well, yeah, I know. I know. That's just even the photos from the bums track look just like the photos of where it ended. And just, it's creepy.
Yeah. I kind of have this opening sequence. Obviously it's written down and it was part of this treatment that some people have seen of, like a POV shot of somebody rummaging around in like a shitty tent or a tarp kind of a box deal, like obviously a homeless person, but from their perspective, right? And they're running across and you see old, BMX memorabilia kind of with wrappers and obviously a homeless person, right? Kind of a deal. And then it just falls back on their back and looks up at the sky and there's a hole and the camera pulls up and starts spinning, swirling over this homeless tent situation, something like that,
Yeah, it's it's dramatic. It really is. It's a story.
Yeah, for sure.
Definitely
So
has to
that's
be
something
told.
else we want to do, right? And I think these are stories that people who don't know shit about bicycles or BMX are gonna.
That's a story that, that would resonate with a wide audience.
Yeah. Our Penton movie, and I'd be happy to send you guys a link of it. It's about John Penton, that, the godfather of off-road riding and, KTM motorcycles and all that stuff. But Jack Penton, John's dad, was they were at a screening like in Baltimore, Maryland, and this young couple come in and sit down next to John Penton, right? And this is the guy the movie is about, right? And the girl is clueless, right? And she's sitting next to John, and he starts chatting her up because John, 88, 90 years old, he's turning 99 this month. He's like, you know anything about motorcycles, And she says, no, my boyfriend brought me to this thing, She was just along for the ride, right? And John and Jack told me that later they looked over at her while the movie's going on, and she's just got tears streaming, And I'm like, man, we did our job,
Story was told.
Yeah. So that's what we tried to do.
It's good. That's fantastic. That's the art part of it. That is the art part. Now let's talk about the art of putting on a BMX race at Frogtown.
Yeah, we need to get this in.
Okay.
It's time to promote the big show.
So
big event.
I think you've told the story many times about how it started, how you were doing the lottery scratching ticket and you won $25 million and you said, I am going to do a BMX race now because I've just got more money than God. And, so let's not even get into that part of it, Tom.
Yeah. I've forgotten that part of it, Brad. So,
think about what you want to say on this episode that would, get people out there. It's 4 weeks away. It's coming up quick. What are your main bullet points that you want people to know about the event? Well,
the thing, honestly, it started off as just an excuse to get old friends together, right? And that is kind of a mantra we even still try to do today. We're always tweaking, the schedule or, how can we get, improve things to let people spend more time together that haven't seen each other in a long time, right? And that was really the whole reason we started it. And then the racing thing, because I've been with the Motocross Files, I've been involved with vintage motocross racing and events in that whole industry. And it hadn't happened in bicycles yet, right? And of course, my background in bicycles, and these regional Hall of Fames that are popping up. And so, the nostalgia thing was kind of creeping into BMX finally, right? It hadn't been there yet. And I was talking with Johnny Valdez and I said, hey, we should have a UBR racers reunion. And I said, but it should be more than just a party. Like maybe we should get some guys together and maybe we can have a race, And I just jokingly kind of threw out, hey, what's up with the old Frogtown downhill track? I was kidding. And he goes, because he lives up there, he goes, oh, it's still there. I go, what do you mean it's still there? He goes, no, it's the hill's still there. They park cars on it during the frog jump. And I'm like, man, I'm making a phone call, and the fairgrounds. I had to explain what we used to do there 40 years ago. And Lori at the fairgrounds is really cool. She says, yeah, let's do it. And that was and Johnny's like, Todd, it's going to cost 25 grand to even think of doing that thing. I'm like, oh, okay. And I figure that sponsors, we know enough people that would throw little chunks at us to cover that. And sure enough, it happened. But I like to say that we created something that it's like Steve Jobs, right? Said, Apple creates products that they didn't know they needed in their lives yet.
Right.
When you think of an iPod or an iMac or an iPhone or whatever, right? And I like to think that that's what we did that first year, is we created something that those guys who showed up didn't know they needed that in their lives, and they were hooked, guys that hadn't either seen each other in 30 or 40 years or hadn't been on a BMX bike or a cruiser in 30 years. It was an excuse to have some fun and get on that hill. The hills are important for this vintage racing. And Tim, you can attest to this, is when you're 60 years old, gravity is your friend, right?
Oh, yeah.
So
it's like downhill skiing.
Yeah. You can't have a vintage race on a flat track, you're going to kill people, so
too much huffing and puffing. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, people had a great time at the first thing. And I think we did it a second year, and then, Miranda and the Dirty Knobs guys come out, but we were already a place in France had already had a race too. They saw our first race. And so they did one in France. And, I guess, we created something, and everyone thinks Frogtown is the granddaddy. It's like the grands of vintage racing. Even Dirty Knobs guy goes, "Oh, Todd, the Frogtown is is the coup de grace, for this stuff." So
that's what I hear.
That's we're proud of that, and we have a great group of volunteers. And I tell those guys, it's hard work. Everyone works their ass off. No one's getting paid. And I tell them, for all the work you guys do, just remember how many you're putting a lot of smiles on faces for 3 days, and that's what it's for. So,
the thing
is,
I
had so much fun last year, and I took guys with me, and they're calling me every day. When are we leaving? How can so-and-so come along? How's your knee, Tim? Because I hurt my knee. How's your knee? You're still going to be able to go, aren't you, Tim? People are so excited about this thing, from clear over here. We're how many miles away are we? 1,600 miles, I think it is.
1,800 miles easy. Yeah. From Nebraska.
Yeah.
Well, we're trying to, obviously it's a vintage thing, but we want to, we had a little bit of success introducing it to modern kids and stuff on their modern bikes, but putting flat pedals on, and man, these kids don't even know how to put their foot out. Seriously, a flat turn, how to deal with loose dirt or some bumps in a rough berm. Like, the kids don't even know how to deal with it. Right. And, we're allowing them to experience that. And this year in a big way. So.
Well, I'm impressed though, because there are a handful of kids that are like modern racers. Like, we saw a guy at the grocery store there in Angels Camp, and he was racing. He was like one of the top 17, 18 experts in the country, and he had a 78 Pro line, and he was out there. He's hooked.
Yeah.
I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but there's a number of those guys that, are really, really getting charged up on this vintage racing.
Last year we tried to change it up because the year before people got home so late because we ran late that, it's dangerous for people in LA or Portland or whatever to hit the road late in the afternoon and still think you got to drive, 500 miles to get to work the next day or whatever. So we tried to change it up to get through everything on Saturdays so people could leave Sunday morning and have, a full day to get home, and kind of thought that, Sunday, we'd have a modern race that would be busy and people would stick around and whatever. Well, all the legend guys and the factories and the sponsors, they left. Right. So the people that showed up on Sunday, to race, we had 22 motos or 23 motos or something. It was small. And, those people paid to park, $15 to park, and that maybe they could only come on Sunday. Right. And, so there wasn't much to see, and of course we got done with the races by 11 o'clock or 11:30. We're done giving out awards and we could start back and tearing down banners and stuff. Right. So that was good. But I had the most fun talking to some little kids racing that track that day, because I'm like detoxing now. I'm winding down already. Right. And, I'd ask these little kids, 10 years old, 12 years old, 8, like, hey, what do you guys think of this track? They go, this is so much fun. This is the best. Right. They were loving it, so this year we've worked hard to make sure that we have, 50 or 75 motos on Sunday. So with this new California Cup Grand Prix. So
let me ask you.
Tell us about the modern race, and you're calling it like the old California Cup. And tell us more about that.
It started off as, hey, how do we get more modern kids to the races, right? And we tried to get a double points race from USA BMX, but because we're not a regularly operating track, we haven't earned one or whatever, so they got rules for that stuff. But so I'm thinking, well, maybe we just call Sunday something different, right? And some of us remember the California Cup back in the day. It was a big deal in the late 70s. And then there was this other thing called the Centurion Grand Prix, which was for 2 years they did. It was a 3-day race on Memorial Day weekend between 3 famous racetracks, Roseville, Auburn, and the famous Grass Valley track. You guys remember that, with the mattresses on the berms and all that stuff?
I remember Grass Valley, yeah. And Auburn, I remember because a bike was named after it.
Exactly.
There were mattresses on the trees, right, at Grass Valley.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
beautiful.
Yeah.
There's a famous shot. We used it of Brent Patterson and Perry Kramer and Toby coming out of the turn there with a mattress on the trees. But anyhow, I said, what, let's blend the two names together and let's come up with the California Cup Grand Prix. And we got 6 this first year. Local tracks are going to have a qualifier beginning next weekend.
Cool.
And all you got to do is race that day, and you get a golden ticket, which allows you to race Sunday at Frogtown on that track.
And do the winners get one of those? Do they get a number plate?
Oh, they get a big trophy that kids can get anymore, right? So
I remember the California Cup, you got number plates. That's
I got my Frogtown number. Yeah. Here's my Frogtown number plate from
you don't think I noticed that in the background, Tim? I ain't no dummy. You want some more? I got more. I got more of those.
What?
You have more
of those.
And here's some of my Frogtown awards.
Oh, look at those. Those are Minnie did such a great job.
Those are awesome. Huh?
Hold one
for the bike show. What's that?
We got to open it up and show Brad.
Yeah. Okay. So
I've been there. I've been to his house. I've looked through them all and admired them. But go ahead, open them up for the viewers.
The Celebrated Jumping Frog, 3rd annual Frogtown Classic.
That is the actual
Huffy bike.
Mark Twain's.
This is for the Huffy.
I was just going to say that's Mark Twain on the front.
Yeah.
The whole heritage of Mark Twain there.
And Mindy
first place in the Huffy class pre-1980.
Are those are all wood burned, aren't they?
Wood burned.
Yeah.
They're super cool. Yeah. And then this is I got first, second, and third in the Huffy class, but we had a little disagreement, Anthony Chambers and I, but we had 4 Huffies, and he says, mine's the one who got second. So I gave him the second, and I took the first and the third. But anyway, this is the Survivor class.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah. Aren't those cool?
And you know what, Tim, we're going to use
the
same design for this year. It's too good.
Yeah, nice. They're cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Now, Todd, let me ask you something. I've been trying to squeeze this in. With the success of Frogtown, and how many years is this now? This will be what year?
The 4th year.
Okay, I couldn't remember if it was 3rd or 4th. So, and we've seen, the Dirty Knobs down there at Dirty Fest, and we've seen Texas do one. Do you project, do you feel, could we see, I'm going to call it a bicycle motocross renaissance where people say, hey, I want to race like this, like we did when we were kids. You said how those kids are. Could we ever see, because you recognize there's vintage motocross series, there's a vintage drag racing series. Look at Gary Turner. He was in that forever, Gary and I would meet out at the drag races all the time.
Yep.
And there's all kinds of vintage things. It's, people have more time now. They have more discretionary income. Could you ever see a bicycle motocross renaissance, a small series or something?
I think so. We are up north in Angels Camp. We're creating new BMX racers for USA BMX. We got fathers and grandfathers riding again.
Yeah.
Right? They started training. Even if it was for Frogtown, they trained for that. But now they're hooked, right? And they liked it, and they didn't kill themselves. And they got kids or grandkids they want to ride with. They're going to the local tracks, and they're starting teams, and they're into it now, right? But I think we all have watched, the scariness and competitiveness of modern BMX racing at an elite level. If you watched Paris,
yeah,
France, like those guys, you weren't going to beat those French guys that day. They were
no kidding, man. That was
insane, right? And man, those tracks can be a little intimidating for people, young people, new people, right? And even I had a conversation last year with B.A. Anderson, right? And I think they're watching us and
obviously, yeah,
and Mike and Eric and those guys at Dirty Fest, everybody closely, and BA said he could see a need for like a feeder series to let kids kind of get their feet wet with a track kind of like Frogtown, or a flat old school flat track,
like a Chandler or something,
Yeah, just something a little tamed down, right? Because nothing like a big asphalt hill and you got a rhythm smooth and you're seeing all these kids that know how to do it. And F that, and slow motion.
No asphalt. No asphalt, please.
Yeah, and he was even like, I wonder if in San Antonio, if there's a place we could build a track that would, kind of do that. It'd still be, regular USA BMX membership and races and everything, but it would be this old style track.
Yeah, and that's what I'm getting at. I think there is a time and a place for it, and I think that that's why I call it bicycle motocross rather than because BMX is transversed into this like almost like a track meet, and I love it. It's got its place, but there's also a place for bicycle motocross like we love, throwing a little bit of dirt, some roosters in the berms, I mean,
and it would be cheaper for an operator to build those kind of tracks, right? Because you don't have the investment. It's not a $5 million project now or a $10 million facility.
Yeah, we can build it with our parents' shovels and rakes.
Well, and a friend that has a skip loader, maybe. Oh, that's the big piece of equipment, right? Pile some big dirt up, and manual starting gate, and don't need the hydraulic lifts and all the stuff, So I think there's a place for that. And I wouldn't be surprised to see if, some tracks start popping up. We actually have the ability that at the fairgrounds in Angels Camp to build a permanent track. They're all for it.
That'd be great.
I'm 500 miles away. I'm not going to be a track operator, right? Yeah. But we have friends in the area there and it would be great for all those kids on that whole western slope of the Sierra Nevada, to have a place up there. But like even at the fairgrounds, I think that would be a place to build an old school style, weekly racing BMX track. We'll save the big hill for the once a year deal. We could never build a permanent place there anyway, where we do Frogtown, but maybe that becomes the first one in the nation that is a old school style, regularly operating under USA BMX rules, two motor transfer system, whatever, but it's not this ultra smooth, asphalted, rhythmed
glorified pump track. I try not to say my true feelings about it too much, but yeah, I mean, it's just pump track racing.
Well,
I mean, it takes a lot of skill and it takes a hell of an athlete to do it. Don't get me wrong, but That just, to me, I never, as a 12, 13-year-old kid, I wouldn't have said, oh, that looks cool. I'm going to go out there and ride the pump track. You know what? On asphalt?
Well, you might have if you were 12 and you hadn't had the experience that we've had. But the difference too is
Yeah.
that there were a lot more empty lots. Like, just take Southern California where we're at, Todd. There were empty lots everywhere that had jumps, and we would all
That's true.
converge there. And now
Yeah.
everything's built up. Yeah,
And
Go
yeah.
ahead, Tim.
Well, and the thing is now, I mean, you can't, like in my neighborhood, Brad, when you moved into my neighborhood, it was all empty lots, like you're saying. And
Yeah.
like we would build trails and jumps and the landowners wouldn't even care. But now
Yeah.
with, liability insurance and everything else, you can't go jumping off somebody's empty lot anymore.
It's just different. No one's going to deny
Yeah.
the spectacle and ooh-ah factor of Paris, whatever, last week, right?
Right.
Like, when those guys come sailing over that first jump and all that stuff, I mean, but
It is incredible.
those guys and those classes are the only guys that do that, right? They're coming off this 25 whatever meter hill or whatever it is.
Right.
And they're doing that. But if you go to the normal BMX track, it's about, man, how can I rhythm, get a good start and rhythm to stay in the hunt, to maybe make a move on the last turn and go down that straightaway. I mean, that's the gist of the race, right? And if you think
is the gist of the race, because I've done it a lot. And, even if I take 2 years off and come back, it's even more of a pump track every 2 years. It's like, okay, I've pedaled 4 times today. I mean,
and it's just different though, I mean, there isn't a spot on a, I don't know, I'll say a lot of modern tracks, whatever, that a kid can't go up and go, man, I'm going to hit that tabletop on that third straightaway. It's really cool. It's got a good lip on the outside. I'm going to do a cross up or a flatty or a knack or whatever. Because you can't do that on those tracks, right? Those obstacles don't exist anymore, right?
Well, I mean,
show off.
That's what I was getting at.
The photo, and that's kind of part of the experience, was when you can be rad, right?
Exactly.
Well, it was motocross. I mean, we were in the dirt. I mean, part of the fun was sliding sideways through the turns.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, you want the kids to graduate to that, right? To be comfortable enough and have enough fun and not be frustrated that they're getting smoked because they can't pump or rhythm or whatever, like the kids that have been doing it all the time. But
our old guys like us,
there's a bridge there, right?
There is a bridge there. When we look at other vintage sports, it also keeps a lot of the history alive. It keeps a lot of the, and it also, from a financial aspect, it keeps another part of the industry alive, because manufacturers look at all of the repop frames that are coming out that people are buying, and some of the manufacturers are benefiting from that, which is good and healthy for the manufacturers.
Good point.
And
yeah, that's a good point.
You go back to 2006, Hoffman and I were producing a video for ABA, and they were still ABA back then. I think it was right before the transition. And it was one of the first, they were just starting to get that rhythm-y type, thing in 06, everything was transitioning. And we showed up at this track up in Utah at Salt Lake Nationals. And Don and I had just what you said, Todd. We were trying to figure out, how do we get that excitement out of here? Because everybody leaves the gate and then everybody's just going like this. We ended up asking BA and Clayton, could you maybe tell the people they can't park along the fence tomorrow? And we had a guy in a pickup truck so that we could get that pan shot all down the first straight and be with them, I mean, because there was no other way to get that, because like you said, they're not out there styling. They're not going into the dirty berm. They're going into this, at the time it was an asphalt berm, I don't know. It's, I think there's a time and a place for a renaissance of bicycle motocross, and I think it'd be a lot of fun.
The time and the place is
Frogtown.
September, what?
6th through the 8th, guys.
Where can they find you online?
Yeah, so frogtownclassicbmxdays.com. and Frogtown Classic BMX Days on Facebook and Instagram, and kind of own that Frogtown Classic BMX Days thing.
You know, the best thing about it is that, Todd, you're a figure in this business. I mean, you have transitioned through, you have had success. You helped place GT, you know, in their marketing and with the TV and all of the things that you've been involved in. It's so cool to see that you had the foresight and the balls to step up and do Frogtown, because you know, it's event promotion is not the easiest. It's always easy to talk about, but it's harder to actually follow it through.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, I mean, I don't have fun at Frogtown, you know, it's work.
You're an event promoter.
Yeah, I'm worried about people having a good time, right? And, you know, people not getting hurt or whatever, you know, so it is stressful, and no one's really making any money at this thing yet, you know, but it's just like one of those things, you can't stop it now, right? I mean, you can't afford to hire anybody to help do it yet.
Yeah.
You do it, you know, and you know, but we have a good group of people, and it's fun. So
before we forget, what can people expect in Angels Camp? Like, you talk about there's amenities. If people want to camp there, they can do that, right? At the campground, they can reserve a camping spot. There are hotels, probably. Are there a list of hotels on the website?
Well, the website has a link. Go Calaveras is one of our sponsors of the Tourism Bureau, and you can go on accommodations. There's plenty of neat hotels and bed and breakfasts and Airbnbs. Actually new this year, and they're one of our new a media sponsor, is the Chicken Ranch, is what it's called, is this new Indian casino in Jamestown, which is about 20 minutes away. It's a gorgeous new facility. It just opened 2 weeks ago.
Oh, really? Wow.
And we have a discount code that'll be on the website next week, where you can save, like, I think it's $70 a night, a room night, to stay there if you want, with our discount code.
Nice.
And it's beautiful. It's in Tuolumne County. You know, Angels Camp is in Calaveras County. And Tuolumne is the road that goes to Yosemite, right? So, but the whole area is beautiful. Wine tasting, whitewater rafting, mountain biking, you know, antiquing. You know, that's the Gold Rush Heartland, Highway 49 that runs right through Angels Camp, you know.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of things that families can do. Like if somebody's, you know, within several hundred miles of Angels Camp and their kids want to race, you know, there's other things for the rest of the family to do too.
Got the Moaning Caverns of Sonora. I mean, there's just, you go Calaveras and hey, what else can we do here? Well, you know, Johnny and Dad are racing, and they're going to see a whole list of stuff. It's really a beautiful countryside, and the people have been really nice to us, and we want to help promote them, you know, so.
And let's not make a mistake. We always talk about being participants and racers, but there are thousands of BMXers who bought the magazines and always jumped in the lots and like that, like we talked about, but never maybe even raced. And they can come out. You do autograph signings and all kinds of stuff of all the heroes and like that also, don't you?
Oh yeah, our Legends of BMX autograph session has actually kind of turned into a thing, you know, because we have this new, we'll have a new poster available that's free. And on Saturday, after the two motos run, we're going to dedicate an hour and a half to, you know, having 50 legendary BMX racers are going to sit there and sign. And the guys love it, you know, and it's, you know, we've had, you know, from Stu Thompson and David Clinton to, you know, Bob Hanna a couple years ago and Jeremy McGrath last year, right? So we try to get some moto stars out too, and it's really neat. And the guys love it too. They don't mind sitting there for an hour and a half, you know. So
yeah, so that's the other thing. It's so many people come out and just enjoy the atmosphere and watch the races, see some of their old heroes race, and throw some dirt around.
You know,
and for the
I saw Donnie Robinson, right, who was on a member of a bronze medalist, right, at the 2008 Olympics, right, and a member of Team USA. And he runs a racetrack in Napa, North Bay BMX, and they're one of our qualifiers for the California Cup. And he came out for the first time last year.
Oh,
And
cool.
he used to race for us at GT when he's this little kid, right? Like, I don't know, he was 10 racing for us on Powerlight, right? And I said, "Hey, Donnie, what do you think of this?" He goes, I'm in awe. It's surreal, Todd. Everywhere I look are my heroes, from when I was a kid.
Yeah.
He was speechless, you know?
Huge
So,
reason for a lot of people to come just for that.
yeah.
And then also, will there be a swap meet?
There's
Because
still
I'm thinking
a
about
meet.
all the
Yep.
the show bike guys, and there's going to be a big bike show again and a
Yep.
swap
And
meet.
Mark Darcy and the American Bike Show Association, the new ABSA Pro, are running the bike show up on the grass area again. And yeah, swap meet. Come look for treasures to build your own cool bike build, so you could watch the Tim Lilithorpe how-to videos and turn it into a show winner someday.
And then sign up for the American Bike
Mark
Show
Twain.
Association Pro
And
and win some awards.
get your own Mark Twain wooden trophy.
Okay, I'm gonna put it on my stone tablet for next year. I will be there. I'll be racing. And
Dude, you got a month to train, Brad.
what's that?
You got a month to train. So
I've
He
been
doesn't
training.
even need to train. He
you
didn't
got
train
room-
for Dirty
you got-
Fest
you
last
got
year.
rooms available at the host hotel, cheap, discounted rates. It's beautiful. Bring the wife up or whatever, the family. It's a beautiful countryside. Send the wife off to go look at the cool antique shops in Jamestown or Sonora or
I'd go broke. She'd come back and she'd go, "Look at all the cool stuff I bought." So
that's how I'm tempting Jeremy McGrath to come this year because he wants to bring his wife, and she has a design store down in Encinitas. I said, Jeremy, we can get Kim fixed up and she won't even notice you're gone at playing in the dirt for 2 days.
she can buy inventory.
Oh yeah. I can give a nice little map.
Awesome. All right, give us those dates one more time before we sign off here.
September 6th through the 8th. Friday the 6th is registration and practice, and we're going to have some modern racing at night, the 4-star series, and it's the last chance qualifier for the California Cup Grand Prix. Saturday is only 2 motos of vintage racing, and we're shutting the track down by probably 1 o'clock to do the autograph session. And then we're saving all the mains and semis for the vintage race to be intersected with the modern California Cup Grand Prix final the next day. So Sunday is
very cool.
Huge.
Cool.
Huge. If you're going to come one day to Frogtown, come Sunday. As far as just seeing lots of racing.
And if you're listening to this right now, we are talking about 2024.
2024. Yes, please.
Podcasts live on forever. We just want to make sure that's clear.
It's the 5th through the 7th of 2025. We already have our dates for next year.
There we go.
Oh.
So
Thinking ahead. Yeah.
Brad.
I know I'm going to call up and make my reservations for the Chicken Ranch BMX.
Yeah, exactly.
Because next year it'll all be outside there. They'll build a dirt hill and it'll be right by the casino so that people can stand there and do the slot machines while their significant others race. So
hey, the other thing I forgot to tell you is Saturday night, the reason we're going to get done really early, hopefully early on Saturday, is because we're doing our Legends of BMX dinner and the first induction ceremony for the Norcal BMX Hall of Fame.
Oh, cool.
Oh, yes.
Saturday night. And we're going to raise some money for John Cruz's Davis Finney Foundation for Parkinson's.
Very nice.
And we're going to induct 40 members into the NorCal Hall of Fame class of 2024. So we're going to automatically bring in all 32 of the people that are in the National Hall of Fame all at once.
How
So
do you?
40,
yeah, that's great.
40,
That's
40
amazing.
speeches.
Yeah,
Brent,
that's
No.
It's going to be a long night.
Nope. We're going to list all the names off. And then Brent Patterson, one guy, is going to come up and accept on behalf of all of them.
Oh,
And Brent is on the logo for the NorCal Hall of Fame. So he's the spokesman for him. So
Then are you gonna have one of those video photo booths over the side and they can each do their own individual and for posterity that goes?
Well, then we're gonna let the 8 not real inductees, but the new people, they're gonna get a few minutes to say something because these are people who would never make it into the National Hall of Fame, but super important up there. So
That's awesome.
Very good.
That's good for Cruz too. I mean, such a nice guy, always doing those cool awards and everything.
oh yeah. He
He's
has been a biggest trooper, for getting Frogtown off the ground. So
It's great.
yeah.
Anything else you want to say before we call it a night?
No, I appreciate you guys giving us the time and me the time to talk about the past and what we currently are doing up there. And Tim, of course, I hope to see you in a month and drag that other Nebraskan guy from Lincoln with you.
Oh, I'd love to. I'm working on it.
Eeyore, Grubber, Greg.
Grubbs is probably
Grubbs.
harder to get there than getting me there. So
I'm trying. I've been trying for a few years, so he'll get there one of these days.
So, well,
Anyhow,
we thank you, Todd, for putting on such an awesome event, for making it happen so that all of us can smile because you're working your butt off while we're, all the racers are enjoying. And that's one of the greatest things.
Yeah.
Well,
Oh yeah. We really appreciate it, man. I know so many people that appreciate what you do, Todd. Thank you.
well, thanks you guys again.
so
So
much.
peace. We'll see you guys in Angels. All right.
We will, and I will be there next year for sure. Hey, everyone, don't forget that you got to go and listen to us. And Radmatic is the station here on YouTube, or you can go over to iTunes or anywhere that you find most popular podcasts and just look for Super Rad BMX. And Todd, thanks again. Tim, thank you. And
guys.
we will
Thanks,
be
Todd.
back next week. And that is a promise, not a threat.
This is the Super Rad BMX Podcast. Down the first straight is the cruising Cornhusker over the jump bonsai Brad. Now your host Brad Fanshaw and Tim Lilladora.
Get ready to represent the Super Rad BMX podcast in style with these rad BMX t-shirts. They're perfect for listening to your favorite Super Rad BMX podcast episodes, hitting the track, or cruising around town, and showing off your passion for BMX culture. Join the Super Rad BMX community and showcase your love for this podcast with these awesome vintage BMX t-shirts. Order yours today on radmatic.com and ride in style.